The first difference between a leader and a worker is vision. A worker looks at the task, a leader looks beyond it. A worker says, "What do I have to do today?" A leader asks, "What can I build today that will matter tomorrow?" The worker follows instructions. The leader creates direction. Jim Rohn once said, "Don't just work at your job, work on yourself." Because your work produces a living, but your self-growth produces a fortune. A worker waits for opportunity, a leader prepares for it. The worker is busy doing, the leader is busy designing. A leader understands that what you see determines what you do. If you can't see beyond the paycheck, you'll never build a legacy. If you only think like a worker, you'll survive. But if you think like a leader, you'll thrive. Leaders don't just clock in. They tune into purpose, to people, to progress. The second shift is responsibility. Workers do what they're told. Leaders take ownership even when they're not told. Leaders don't blame, they claim. They claim the challenge, the result, and the future. Workers wait for orders, but leaders give themselves orders. That's what separates those who dream from those who deliver. A worker says, "It's not my fault." A leader says, "It's my problem, so I'll fix it." When you think like a leader, you stop asking for permission to grow. You give yourself the green light. You stop waiting for inspiration. You become the inspiration. Responsibility is the bridge from average to exceptional. It's the moment you decide that you don't need a title to lead, you just need initiative. The worker focuses on effort. The leader focuses on impact. The worker sees tasks, the leader sees transformation. The third difference is influence. Workers depend on instructions, but leaders depend on influence. A worker contributes to the team, a leader creates the team spirit. A worker manages tasks, a leader moves hearts. You see, leadership isn't about authority, it's about authenticity. It's not about position, it's about persuasion. When you think like a leader, you understand that people don't follow the job title, they follow the energy, the belief, and the conviction you bring. A leader multiplies others, a worker maintains themselves. Leaders know that the best way to rise is to lift others. They turn effort into example, and example into excellence. Influence is not about controlling others. It's about inspiring them to control themselves. That's the mindset that transforms ordinary workplaces into extraordinary movements. The first difference between a leader and a worker is vision. Vision is not just about seeing, it's about perceiving what others overlook. A worker looks at what is in front of them, the tasks, the duties, the deadlines. A leader looks beyond the possibilities, the people, the purpose. A worker focuses on the immediate. A leader focuses on the ultimate. And that's what Jim Rohn meant when he said, "Don't just work at your job, work on yourself." Because your job will make you a living, but working on yourself will make you a fortune. Leaders understand that their greatest project is not the company, not the plan, not even the team. It's at themselves. You see, a worker wakes up and thinks, "What must I do today?" A leader wakes up and thinks, "What can I build today that will still matter tomorrow?" That's the gap between employment and empowerment. One works to get through the day, the other works to change the day. A worker clocks in with their hands, a leader clocks in with their heart. One does what's required, the other does what's remarkable. Because leadership is not a title. It's a way of thinking, a way of seeing, and a way of being. A worker follows a map. A leader draws one. The worker waits for instructions. The leader creates direction. The worker asks, "How do I do this?" The leader asks, "Why are we doing this?" It's that extra layer of thought that makes all the difference. The leader knows that action without vision is motion without meaning. Many people are moving, but very few are moving forward. Leadership begins when you stop asking only what needs to be done and start asking what extra needs to be created. Jim Rohn used to say, You cannot change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction overnight. That's vision. A leader doesn't need to see the whole staircase. They just need to see the next step, and they take it with faith, focus, and fire. Vision is not luck, it's clarity. It's the ability to stand in the middle of chaos and still see order. It's seeing opportunity where others see obstacles. It's choosing to believe in the unseen before it becomes the seen. A worker says, "This is not my job." A leader says, "This is my chance." A worker says, "I hope someone fixes this." A leader says, "I'll take care of it." The difference, vision. The ability to see that every small act can lead to a greater impact. Leaders see themselves as part of something bigger. They don't just see their role. They see their responsibility. They don't wait for the future, they shape it. When you think like a worker, your vision stops at the paycheck. But when you think like a leader, your vision reaches the purpose. The paycheck sustains you, purpose transforms you. The worker looks for security, the leader searches for significance. One asks, "How much will I get?" The other asks, "How much will I become?" The worker seeks comfort, the leader seeks growth. And that's why leaders don't just make a living, they make a difference. Leaders know that what you see determines what you do. If you see only problems, you'll only fix. But if you see possibilities, you'll create. Workers wait for opportunity, leaders prepare for it. When opportunity finally knocks, the worker opens the door nervously, the leader opens it confidently because they've been expecting it. A worker looks at the weather to decide their mood. A leader looks at their mission to decide their mindset. Leaders live by design, not by default. A worker is trained to think in tasks. A leader is trained to think in trends. Workers manage their time. Leaders multiply it by vision. Vision gives power to purpose. It transforms effort into energy. When you know why you're doing something, and even the hardest days become meaningful. That's why leaders don't burn out as easily as workers. They're fueled by something deeper than the task list. They're driven by a sense of destiny. Leaders are dreamers with deadlines. They can imagine the impossible and then discipline themselves to make it real. They can hold a picture of the future so vividly that people around them begin to see it too. That's the secret of influence. People don't follow orders. They follow vision. When you think like a leader, your ideas start to inspire. Your words start to move people. Your actions start to ripple. You begin to see not just who you are, but who you're becoming. So ask yourself, are you working on a job or are you working on a journey? Because one ends when the shift is over, the other continues for life. A worker gets tired when the hours are long. A leader gets inspired when the mission is clear. The worker says, "Someday I'll get there." The leader says, "Today I'll take a step." That's vision. It doesn't live in the future. It breathes in the present. The truth is, the moment you start thinking like a leader, the world starts responding differently to you. People begin to listen differently. Opportunities start to find you. Because leadership begins in the mind long before it appears in results. It's not about position, it's about perception. You can be a worker with a leader's mind and still change everything. That's the beauty of it. So think like a leader. See beyond the task. Work not just for the check, but for the challenge. Don't let your eyes be limited by what you can see. Let them be expanded by what you can imagine. Because when you start thinking like a leader, you stop living like a follower. You stop waiting for the world to show you the way, and you start becoming the one who shows it. The second shift is responsibility. That single word separates the ordinary from the extraordinary, the employed from the empowered, the door from the difference maker. Workers do what they are told. Leaders take charge even when no one is watching. A worker says, "Tell me what to do." A leader says, "I'll figure out what must be done." That's where greatness begins, not in following directions, but in creating them. Jim Rohn once said, "The price of greatness is responsibility." And that's the truth that every successful person eventually learns. Responsibility is not a burden, it's a privilege. It means you are trusted with the power to make things happen, not just to react to them. Workers wait for orders, leaders give themselves orders. That's the mindset shift that changes everything. A worker says, "It's not my fault." A leader says, "It's my problem, so I'll fix it." A worker asks, "Who's to blame?" A leader asks, "What can I learn?" When you think like a leader, you stop looking for excuses and start looking for execution. You stop waiting for inspiration and start becoming it. Responsibility means you no longer hand your power away to circumstances, people, or luck. You hold it. You own it. You direct it. You can always tell when someone has adopted a leader's mindset. They don't need a boss to motivate them. They are driven by an inner standard. They don't do the minimum, they do what's meaningful. They don't look for recognition, they look for results. Leaders don't complain about the storm. They adjust their sails. They understand that life doesn't get easier, they get stronger. That's the power of taking ownership. It shifts your energy from helplessness to authority, from frustration to focus. Responsibility begins the moment you decide to stop being a victim of circumstances and start being a designer of outcomes. Workers react, leaders respond. Workers avoid blame, leaders accept challenge. A leader doesn't need everything to be perfect. They make progress in the middle of imperfection. Because responsibility is not about control, it's about contribution. It's saying, even if I didn't cause it, I'll correct it. That kind of mindset doesn't just change your work. It changes your worth. Jim Rohn taught that you can't hire someone to do your push-ups. That's responsibility. You can't outsource your growth, your learning, or your discipline. You have to do your own push-ups. Face your own fears. Fight your own battles. A worker looks for someone to lift them. A leader learns to lift themselves. Responsibility doesn't always feel glamorous. It's often uncomfortable, heavy, and humbling. But it's in that weight that strength is built. The people who rise in life are the ones who stop saying, "It's not my job," and start saying, "It's my opportunity." The leaders don't wait for permission to grow. They give themselves the green light. They don't wait for the perfect time, they make time. That's responsibility in motion. When you think like a worker, you're waiting for the signal to act. When you think like a leader, you become the signal. You light the fire that others follow. Responsibility is the moment you decide to stop being managed and start managing yourself. It's when you stop asking, "Who will help me?" and start declaring, "I will help myself." Responsibility builds trust. People follow those who own their word, who deliver what they promise, who stay steady under pressure. A worker may need supervision. A leader becomes the standard others watch. You can't lead if you can't be trusted, and you can't be trusted if you don't take responsibility. Every mistake becomes a lesson, every failure a foundation. A leader's greatest strength isn't perfection, it's accountability. They face what others avoid. They admit what others excuse. A worker says, "It's not fair." A leader says, "It's my turn." The worker wants the reward. The leader earns the respect. Responsibility transforms your identity. You stop being a participant in someone else's story and become the author of your own. You stop saying, "I wish," and start saying, "I will." You realize that life doesn't respond to wishes, it responds to work. Responsibility gives you back control of your destiny. The worker waits for motivation. The leader moves with intention. The worker needs direction. The leader creates it. The worker seeks comfort. The leader seeks challenge. Because leaders understand something powerful. The moment you take full responsibility for your life, you take full control of your future. You stop asking life to be easier and start asking yourself to be better. You stop demanding less challenge and start demanding more character. Responsibility isn't about blame, it's about power. When you think like a leader, you no longer see problems as punishments, but as platforms. Every difficulty becomes a test of discipline, every setback a lesson in persistence. Responsibility makes you stronger because it keeps you accountable to your own potential. It reminds you that nobody owes you success. You owe it to yourself. The person who blames less always builds more. The person who takes ownership becomes unstoppable. Leaders are not the people who never fail. They are the people who never flee from failure. They face it, fix it, and forge forward. Workers see failure as final. Leaders see it as feedback. They know that mistakes are proof of movement, not weakness. Responsibility is the inner voice that says, I can do better and I will. It's the refusal to surrender your power to excuses. Because excuses might sound comforting today, but they cost you tomorrow. So when you think like a leader, you stop waiting for change. You become the change. You stop waiting for someone to solve it. You step in and solve it yourself. Responsibility transforms you from dependent to decisive, from reactive to proactive, from ordinary to outstanding. It doesn't happen overnight. But it begins the moment you say those three powerful words. It's on me. That's where real leadership starts, not with authority, not with applause, but with accountability. The third difference is influence. Influence is the invisible force that separates those who manage tasks from those who move people. Workers depend on instructions, but leaders depend on inspiration. A worker contributes to the team, but a leader creates the team spirit. The difference is not in authority, it's in attitude. Jim Rohn said, the challenge of leadership is to be strong, but not rude, kind, but not weak, bold, but not a bully, thoughtful, but not lazy, humble, but not timid, proud, but not arrogant. That's influence. Knowing how to lead hearts, not just hands. Because leadership isn't about controlling others, it's about inspiring them to control themselves. A worker says, tell me what to do. A leader says, let me show you why it matters. The worker finishes a task, the leader fuels a purpose. You see, people don't follow titles, they follow trust. They don't listen to words, they feel energy. Influence begins where authority ends. A boss can demand obedience, but only a leader can earn commitment. The moment you start thinking like a leader, you stop managing effort and start multiplying enthusiasm. A worker might have skill, but a leader has spirit. Skill can complete a job, spirit can create a movement. The worker thinks about the next paycheck. The leader thinks about the next generation. Influence means seeing beyond results. It means shaping culture. It's about being the kind of person whose presence inspires others to rise and whose absence reminds them of what's possible. When you think like a leader, you understand that the most powerful way to influence others is through example. People don't do what they're told. They do what they see. Leaders understand that influence is not about speaking louder. It's about standing taller in character. You don't have to be the loudest in the room when your integrity already speaks for you. Influence isn't given by a position, it's earned by consistency. Every decision you make, every word you say, every promise you keep builds or breaks your influence. That's why true leaders guard their reputation with their life. Not because of ego, but because it's the foundation of their impact. A worker focuses on getting things done. A leader focuses on getting people better. Leaders don't just want the job completed, they want the people around them to grow through it. Influence is the art of turning people's potential into performance. It's the ability to see greatness in others before they see it themselves. A worker looks for directions. A leader gives others direction and belief. Influence is when people start to believe not only in you, but in themselves because of you. Think about it. The greatest leaders in history were not remembered for how perfectly they managed. They were remembered for how deeply they inspired. People like Jim Rohn, who didn't just teach about success, but helped people believe they could achieve it. Leaders leave fingerprints on minds. They plant ideas that outlive their own voice. Influence is about legacy, what you leave behind in people's hearts long after you've left the room. Workers often chase approval. Leaders create alignment. A worker says, "Do they like me?" A leader says, "Do they trust me?" A worker seeks comfort and agreement. A leader seeks strength and conviction. Leaders understand that influence is not about pleasing everyone. It's about leading with principle, even when it's unpopular. Because influence that's built on truth lasts longer than influence built on popularity. Real leaders don't follow the crowd. They create a path that others are willing to follow. A worker may manage people's time, but a leader manages people's energy. Influence is emotional intelligence in action. The ability to connect, to listen, to understand before trying to be understood. People don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. And leaders make people feel seen, valued, capable, and important. That's what makes influence powerful. It awakens something in others that was asleep. Influence also requires humility. True leaders know that power without compassion becomes manipulation. Influence thrives where ego dies. The leader understands that the goal is not to be admired. It's to make others admirable. A worker might say, "I did this." A leader says, influence turns me into we. It's the shift from taking credit to giving courage. The greatest leaders don't build followers. They build more leaders. Influence is not a performance, it's a presence. It's the quiet strength that radiates when you're aligned with your purpose. You don't have to talk about being a leader. When you walk like one. Influence grows from authenticity. When your words and actions are one, people trust you. When they trust you, they listen. When they listen, they act. And that's how leadership expands. Through the ripple effect of genuine influence. Workers often see themselves as part of the system. Leaders see themselves as shapers of the system. Workers say, "That's how it's always been done." Leaders ask, "How can it be done better?" That question alone carries influence because it challenges stagnation. Influence isn't about being right all the time. It's about daring to lead with vision when others choose comfort. People follow leaders who give them hope, clarity, and courage. Influence is not about having followers. It's about creating momentum. Every great company, movement, and transformation starts with one person who chose to influence instead of simply instruct. Influence begins the moment you decide to live your values loudly, to show up every day not just to complete a job, but to communicate belief. The energy of a leader can lift an entire room. The conviction of one person can shift an entire culture. Influence is not in how many people you command, but in how many you uplift. And that's why the power of influence is limitless. When you think like a leader, your words carry weight. Your attitude becomes contagious. Your consistency becomes credibility. People begin to look at you differently, not because you told them to, but because you showed them something worth believing in. Influence doesn't come from authority. It comes from authenticity, from action, from alignment. The worker manages what exists. The leader inspires what's next. And when you reach that level of thinking, you stop asking, "Who will follow me?" and start declaring, "Who will I lift today?" You see, at the end of the day, everything we've talked about, vision, responsibility, influence, it all leads to one single truth, as leadership is not a position, it's a mindset. It's not about where you work, it's about how you think. The difference between a worker and a leader isn't in the uniform, the title, or the salary. It's in the way they see the world. A worker says, I have to. A leader says, I get to. A worker waits for opportunity. A leader creates opportunity. And if you want to live a life that means something, you've got to stop waiting for the world to give you permission to lead and start leading yourself today. Look around you. Every success story you admire, every entrepreneur, every speaker, every creator, every visionary started exactly where you are right now, unsure, ordinary, unseen. But they made a decision. A decision to stop thinking like a worker who needs direction and to start thinking like a leader who gives it. They realized that greatness doesn't begin when the conditions are right. It begins when you decide to be right for the conditions. Leadership is not found in comfort. It's forged in challenge. It's not built by waiting. It's built by becoming. You want to know what separates winners from wanderers? Leaders take action when others make excuses. Workers say, I'll do it when I feel ready. Leaders say, I'll start, and that's how I'll get ready. Workers say, I don't know how. Leaders say, I'll learn how. Workers say, someone should do something. Leaders say, I'm someone. That's the voice you need to awaken inside you. The voice that refuses to wait for permission to rise. Jim Rohn said, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Because when you develop yourself, everything else develops around you. Don't chase success. Attract it by the person you become. Stop thinking like a worker clocking hours and start thinking like a leader designing outcomes. Don't just show up to make a living. Show up to make a difference. Your work may give you a paycheck, but your mindset will give you a purpose. You were not born to blend in. You were born to stand out. You were not created to follow the path. You were built to pave one. The world doesn't need more employees. It needs more examples. It needs men and women who will rise above mediocrity, who will step into responsibility, who will ignite others through influence. The world needs you to lead. Not someday, but now. Because leadership isn't waiting for your promotion, it's waiting for your permission. Don't ever tell yourself that you're too small to make an impact. A spark is small, but it can burn down a forest. One seed looks insignificant, but it can grow into a tree that feeds generations. One voice can start a movement. One decision can rewrite a destiny. The size of your action doesn't matter. The sincerity of your vision does. When you think like a leader, everything about you changes. Your energy, your presence, your words, your results. You stop counting hours and start creating value. You stop asking, what do I get? And start asking, what can I give? That's leadership. Leaders are builders. Builders of people, of ideas, of futures. They don't wait for motivation. They manufacture it. They don't depend on the mood. They depend on the mission. When things go wrong, they don't ask, why me? They ask, what's next? Because leaders know that life doesn't happen as to them. It happens for them. Every obstacle becomes an opportunity to rise higher. Every setback becomes a setup for a greater comeback. Every difficulty becomes a teacher in disguise. And here's the truth, no one will hand you the mindset of a leader. You've got to earn it every single day. You earn it in discipline. You earn it in the small choices when no one's watching. You earn it when you take responsibility instead of excuses, when you stay focused instead of frustrated, when you choose growth over comfort. Every moment you refuse to quit, you strengthen the leader inside you. Every time you choose courage over convenience, you build character. Imagine waking up each day knowing you are the designer of your destiny, not a victim of circumstance. Imagine walking into your workplace, your home, your life with the quiet confidence that says, I don't need a title to lead. I am the title. That's not arrogance, that's awareness. That's understanding that leadership begins the moment you take charge of your own life. You can't lead others until you learn to lead yourself. Your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, your focus. So stand tall. Lift your head. Stop looking for someone to save you. The leader you've been waiting for is already inside you. It's time to wake them up. You don't need the world's approval. You need your own belief. You don't need permission, you need purpose. You don't need everything to be perfect. You just need to begin. Because when you begin, momentum appears, and momentum creates miracles. Leaders don't wait for the world to change. They've arched the change. They don't wait for the light. They have become the light. And when you start thinking like that, you'll notice something magical. People will start following you without you asking them to. Not because you told them to, but because you showed them how. That's the highest form of influence. To inspire others simply by the way you live. So, from this moment on, stop thinking like a worker waiting for direction and start thinking like a leader setting direction. See beyond your tasks. Take ownership of your life. Influence others by your example. Be the kind of person whose energy speaks louder than their words. Because leadership isn't about how many people follow you. It's about how many people you lift. And when you lift others, you rise too. The time for excuses is over. The time for waiting is gone. It's your time to lead. It's your time to rise. It's your time to think, act, and live like the person you were always meant to become. Don't just work for the world. Work on yourself until you're ready to change it. That's the call of leadership. That's the call of destiny. And if you can hear it in your heart right now, don't ignore it, answer it. Because the world doesn't just need more workers. It needs more leaders like you